India is a land where antiquity isn't hidden beneath the dust of centuries, but breathes in every stone, every temple, and every lost symbol. Here, archaeology confronts puzzles that seem too complex, even for modern times. Gigantic monoliths, underground structures, perfect calculations, strange astronomical complexes, and traces of forgotten technologies. All of this forces us to reconsider our understanding of the past. Here are 20 real mysteries of India, each of which still has no definitive answer. Harappan script. Imagine huge, once bustling cities in the valley of a great river, where people built houses of baked brick, laid out straight streets, and constructed complex drainage systems. In the ruins of these cities, archaeologists have found dozens of small tablets, seals, and fragments covered with strange symbols. These symbols are the main encrypted voice of the vanished Harappan civilization. Harappan writing consists of short strings of symbols, usually 3, 5, or sometimes 10. No long texts like sacred books, letters, or laws have been found. Everything appears to be seals, labels, tags, or small tablets used in everyday life. It is precisely this shortness of the inscriptions that greatly hinders scholars attempting to decipher the hidden language. The symbols are extremely diverse. They include simple lines, geometric shapes, amazing animal figures, fantastical creatures, and strange emblems. Some signs resemble horns, fish, vessels, trees, or even human heads. However, we cannot be certain whether these are drawings of objects or conventional symbols for sounds and syllables, as in other writing systems. To read an ancient text, a key is needed. A famous stone inscribed in several languages once provided such a key, allowing the understanding of ancient Egyptian script. For the Harappan script, such a saving grace is lacking. There is not a single bilingual inscription where a familiar language appears side by side with the same text in Harappan script. Therefore, all attempts at reading it rely on guesswork and comparisons. Some researchers believe these signs conceal a language related to modern southern Indian languages. Others are convinced that the connection was more likely with ancient peoples living further north. Still others argue that this is not a true script, but a special symbol system for religious and economic markings. None of these theories has yet been proven to the point of being compelled to accept the others. Interestingly, these signs are found on almost everything related to accounting and property management. These include seals, which could be used to make impressions on clay, pieces of ceramics, rare metal objects, and jewelry. It seems that writing is closely linked to trade, the storage of goods, the names of owners, and community symbols. But what exactly is written there, the names of gods, people, product designations, or protective formulas, remains a mystery. Scientists have tried, and continue to try, to unravel the mystery using new methods. They count the number of times and in what order the same symbols appear, compare them with known languages, and construct complex tables. These methods demonstrate that the symbols truly behave like elements of a genuine script, not just random drawings. But even with this knowledge, deciphering the code hasn't made any decisive progress. The mystery is heightened by the fact that the Harappan civilization itself vanished, as if it had been switched off. Cities were deserted, their traditional way of life was disrupted. There are theories about shifting river courses, floods, climate change, and possible conflicts. But without reading these people's own texts, we see only the surface picture. The voices of the inhabitants themselves are lost. They remain silent behind a wall of incomprehensible signs. Imagine standing before you in a vast library, thousands of volumes stacked on the shelves, but all of them written in a language for which there is no dictionary. You see the images, the repeating phrases, you sense the structure, but you can't understand a single phrase. This is how a researcher senses the Harappan script. It is clearly intelligent, orderly, not created by chance, yet it remains a closed door with a lock for which we have not yet found the key. Sometimes new tablets and seals are discovered, and each time the hope arises that this particular find will provide a clue. Perhaps one day, archaeologists will discover a long text or inscription alongside a later language. Perhaps new cities will be discovered where writing was used differently. But for now, the whole world is forced to watch these tiny signs as if they were silent films. And there's a special power in this. Harappan writing reminds us that even with modern technology, blind spots remain. We can peer into space, but we can't read a tiny seal made by someone who lived many thousands of years ago. This undecipherable system of symbols is one of India's most stubborn and enigmatic mysteries, and it opens our path to the world of 20 real secrets of this land. City of Mohenjo-Daro. When archaeologists first cleared away the top layer of earth and saw the smooth streets, neat neighborhoods, and strange silence of the place, it became clear they were looking at a city that had vanished suddenly. Mohenjo-Daro stands in the valley of a great river and looks as if its inhabitants had vanished in a single day, leaving behind empty houses and an untold story. The city is striking in its thoughtfulness. It's divided into blocks, as if on an invisible grid. The streets are straight, meeting at right angles. Each house has a complex system of canals that drain water directly into the city's main water supply. It seems incredible that people from such a distant past could build so rationally and cleanly. But the strangest thing is why it all suddenly came to an end. The citadel rises in the upper part of the city. It's not a fortress in the traditional sense, but rather an administrative heart. It contains a huge reservoir resembling a swimming pool carved into the ground and lined with brick. Many believe it was associated with purity rituals or important public ceremonies. But why would such a structure stand in a city that eventually vanished, leaving almost no trace of life? There are no signs of a hasty evacuation on the streets. No weapons or ruined walls have been found, and there are no significant signs of fire. The houses look as if people left peacefully, but never returned. Researchers have long sought an explanation for this strange departure. Some say the river changed course, leaving residents without water. Others say severe floods made life unbearable. Still others believe that natural changes gradually caused the city to desert. But all these are theories, not answers. In some places, archaeologists have found human remains right on the streets. They seem to have been caught in an unexpected event. But there are no signs of struggle or destruction nearby. What brought people there? The locals could have died from a disease whose outbreak we don't know about, or from some disaster that left no visible traces. But why then did no one attempt to bury the dead? Why did the city simply cease to exist? The bricks used to build Mohenjo-Daro are remarkably uniform. They are made to a single standard. This speaks to a strict system of production and control. But why was such precision necessary? And why did this same system disappear as soon as the city fell into decline? If natural disaster were the sole cause, similar skills would have continued to exist in other settlements. But this did not happen. The city plans reveal not just order, but a unified design. It's as if one person or one group of people had calculated the layout of streets, houses, and canals in advance. This astonishing urban planning approach emerges unexpectedly, persists for several centuries, and then vanishes without a trace. There are no inscriptions, no indications that indicate who designed the system. What's particularly strange is that almost no objects have been found in the city that could reveal anything about power. There are no statues of rulers, no monumental palaces, no obvious signs indicating a ruling dynasty. This creates the sense of a society where power was distributed differently than we're used to. Perhaps it was more collective. But without texts and direct evidence, we can only speculate. There's another mystery. The inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro used advanced measurement methods. Standards for weights and sizes are found throughout the city and differ little from each other. This speaks to a precise and strict system of trade and control. But how could such a sophisticated system vanish as if it had been switched off? The city was a major trading center. Goods from distant lands reached it, and others left in the opposite direction. But when the city was abandoned, the trade routes changed, as if someone had severed the lifeline connecting Mohenjo-Daro to the rest of the world. Today, the excavated neighborhoods stand in a sweltering silence. The sun illuminates the empty streets where no one walks. The canals, once filled with water, have dried up. The houses, built of uniformly sized bricks, are silent. It seems as if the city still listens to the footsteps of those who never returned. Every discovered object, a vessel, a piece of jewelry, a seal, is like a hint of a larger story. But without the master key, without deciphering the Harappan script, we see only a picture, not a story. Mohenjo-Daro remains one of India's deepest mysteries, a city built with incredible precision and abandoned without explanation. And while archaeologists continue to explore it, every brick, every street, every bone discovered reminds us that vanished civilizations were no less capable than modern humans. Perhaps they knew things we haven't yet grasped. Sunken ruins of Gujarat. Off the coast of Gujarat, where the sea appears calm and unassuming, a wondrous underwater world actually lurks. In the depths, where the water becomes denser and quieter, archaeologists have discovered stone structures resembling streets, building foundations, and square-like areas. These forms are too perfect to be the random work of nature. Researchers have dived there many times, and each time they've found new fragments. Stone blocks laid out exactly like one another, long lines resembling walls, and sections where a clear geometric arrangement is visible. All this creates the impression of a vast settlement that once stood on dry land and then ended up underwater. But how and when this happened remains unknown. Some believe this area was once part of an ancient coastline that gradually sank under the influence of natural processes. But even if the land did sink, how can we explain the artificial precision of the stonework? The slabs appear to follow a single plan, creating the impression that the city was designed by someone with advanced construction skills. Underwater images reveal long rows of blocks arranged in straight lines. They run parallel to each other, as if leaving traces of streets. Between these lines, larger structures resembling foundations are visible. Researchers cautiously speculate that some of these may have been houses or public buildings. However, the layout itself appears too orderly to be a matter of chance. The sea often preserves traces of past lands. Around the world, there are examples of areas that were once densely populated but later sank beneath the waves due to slow subsidence or abrupt environmental changes. But the ruins off Gujarat stand out for their likely antiquity and scale. They look as if an entire city, not a few random rocks, were submerged underwater. In some areas of the seabed, stones are visible, carved as if by ancient craftsmen. Smooth edges, uniform sizes, angles reminiscent of cut marks, all raise questions. Could nature have created shapes that so closely resemble the work of builders? Or are these the remains of a culture about which we know far less than we would like? What's interesting is that the ruins lie near a place known for its ancient legends. Large settlements once existed there on dry land. Their inhabitants engaged in maritime trade, crafts, and possibly possessed the knowledge to build complex cities. If the underwater ruins are indeed connected to these ancient peoples, then we are witnessing a piece of a vast history that remains inaccessible. The difficulty of the study lies in the fact that everything changes underwater. Sand can bury entire areas, currents shift rocks, and vegetation and marine sediments obscure their contours. Creating an accurate map of the ruins requires long and careful work. But even incomplete images reveal that beneath the water lies a place that was once part of a vast human life. Scientists continue to explore the area. They are bringing to the surface small artifacts, pieces of pottery, and fragments of stone tools. These objects don't provide a direct answer, but they confirm that vibrant streets once bustled here. Hundreds of people walked along them, worked, socialized, and worshipped their gods. Now, all of this is hidden beneath the water, and we see only hints of its former size. The most mysterious thing about these ruins is the sense of lost time. We see traces of planning, traces of craftsmanship, traces of human design, but we don't know who left them. The city stands before us like a stone shadow, suggesting that history may be much deeper and broader than we're accustomed to thinking. And perhaps these underwater structures will one day help us unlock a chapter of the past that the sea has preserved for many millennia. Iron Pillar of Delhi. At the very heart of the ancient complex, amid stone arches and carved walls, stands a pillar that has fascinated visitors for centuries. It appears simple, a tall metal column, smooth and dark, with barely visible inscriptions. But this simplicity conceals a mystery that remains definitively unexplained. The pillar is virtually rust-free, despite standing outdoors for many hundreds of years. Researchers spent a long time examining its surface. It is smooth, without deep cracks or major corrosion. Only a thin film of dark plaque covers the metal, as if protecting it. This film has become one of the main mysteries. It is unlike ordinary rust, which destroys metal. On the contrary, it creates a protective layer, as if specially created by nature or ancient craftsmen. The column is made of pure iron, and that's no less surprising. In ancient times, people rarely worked with iron of such quality. Typically, the metal contained impurities that quickly caused corrosion. But here, the impurities are distributed in such a way that the metal remains strong and corrosion is almost non-existent. It's unknown how the craftsmen achieved such purity, as complex smelting technologies didn't exist back then. Some experts suggest that the secret lay not only in the purity of the iron, but also in the way it was joined. The column consists of multiple layers, apparently forged and joined to create a strong, monolithic structure. But how exactly this was done, and what tools were used, remains a mystery. The ancient craftsmen possessed skills that we can only attempt to reconstruct today from the traces left on the column's surface. The column bears inscriptions. They are carefully carved, with lines that are still clearly legible. These inscriptions mention the ruler in whose name the pillar was created and extol his virtues. But the inscriptions themselves don't reveal the most important thing, how exactly this metal was created. They merely remind us that the column was an important symbol, an object of special respect. It's surprising that natural conditions haven't destroyed the pillar over the centuries. Rain, heat, humidity, and temperature fluctuations, all of these should have left deep marks. But the column stands as if resisting time. Scientists have studied the climate, the chemical composition of the soil, and the effects of air. All of these factors play a role, but they don't fully explain the phenomenon. Some believe the column is rusting, but so slowly that it's almost imperceptible to us. Indeed, even the strongest protection weakens over time. But how can we explain the fact that other iron structures from the same period have crumbled while the column remains almost perfectly preserved? This difference creates the feeling that the ancient craftsmen knew something about metals that we have forgotten. Some believe the secret lies in a special method of heating the iron. If the metal was heated and cooled repeatedly, and the temperatures were precisely controlled, the structure became dense and stable. But for this to work, a great deal of skill was required. Without precision instruments, they had to rely on color, sound, and texture. It seems the artisans possessed a keen sense of the material. Other researchers believe the composition of the coal used during forging played a key role. If the coal was made from certain types of wood, it could produce the right temperature and chemical environment. This coal created a special atmosphere in the furnace, filling the metal with components that would later react and form a protective layer. However, this theory remains speculative for now. The column was erected on a high hill, perhaps as a symbol of victory, faith, or strength. It stood there for centuries and witnessed the change of rulers, wars, destruction, and restoration. People around it lived, left, returned, and built new structures. But the column remained in place like a guardian of time. What's particularly impressive is that even when damaged, the column doesn't break. Its surface bears marks of impact, possibly caused by attempts to destroy it. But the metal withstood these attacks. This speaks to its inherent strength. It seems to have been created not simply for beauty, but to endure the centuries. Today, the column has become a magnet. Tourists approach it, examine its smooth surface, and try to understand what makes it so special. Scientists continue to take samples, analyze them, and develop new hypotheses. But a complete explanation remains elusive. The metal behaves differently than most iron objects of the time, and this makes the column unique. In the evenings, when the sun sets and a soft light falls on the surface, the column seems almost alive. Its smooth edges reflect the last rays, as if reminding us that it has endured more than many human cities and kingdoms. It is not just an ancient relic, it is a symbol of mastery and mystery. The Iron Pillar of Delhi remains one of India's most extraordinary ancient structures. It combines a craft long since lost and knowledge we are only just beginning to understand. Perhaps one day, scientists will fully reconstruct the technology of its creation. But for now, it stands in silence, and everyone who approaches it senses that before them is not just metal, but the trace of a great skill preserved through the centuries. Kailasanatha Temple, Ellora. If someone were to see this temple for the first time and were unaware of its history, they would assume it was a vast stone city, built piecemeal. But the real miracle lies elsewhere. The temple wasn't built. It was carved from a single rock, from top to bottom. Imagine a mountain that wasn't destroyed or dismantled block by block, but carefully removed of all unnecessary elements, leaving a majestic sanctuary within. This immediately makes Kailasanatha one of India's greatest architectural mysteries. The temple is striking in its scale. Its height is comparable to a multi-story building, and its width is so vast that an entire courtyard with galleries could be accommodated within. Every column, wall, statue, staircase, and corridor is a single unit. There are no conventional masonry joints or seams, no individual stones, no traces of assembly. Everything is carved from the solid mass, as if the stone were soft and the craftsman simply sculpted it according to his own design. But most importantly, how these ancient masters accomplished this without precision instruments or machines. The work began from the top. This means that the craftsmen first determined the height of the final structure and then gradually worked their way down, layer by layer. One false move could have destroyed the future halls, upset the proportions, or made the temple unstable. But they were right. Everything was calibrated with such precision that each hall is connected to the next by perfect passages, and every column stands exactly where it should. Imagine the labor required to achieve this. The stone doesn't just have to be cut away, it has to be separated evenly, preserving the strength of the mass. Tool marks on the walls indicate that the craftsmen used iron tools that would seem primitive today. Yet, despite this, the lines were even, the angles precise, and the surfaces remarkably smooth. Inside, the temple is a veritable labyrinth. It features an inner courtyard surrounded by two-story galleries. There are enormous columns, carved in such a way that they appear to be separate structures, though in fact they are part of a single mass. There are statues of elephants, lions, and mythical creatures that seem to support the vaults. There are enormous sacred figures, carved with such precision that they seem to be made of soft material rather than hard rock. At the center of the complex is the main sanctuary. It appears to be a separate temple, as if standing in the middle of a courtyard. But upon closer inspection, it becomes clear. This is not a separate building, but another section of the same rock. This impression is created by an architectural illusion, carefully crafted by the ancient masters down to the smallest detail. It seems they deliberately intended to overwhelm visitors. But how was it possible to calculate such a structure in advance? To carve the temple from top to bottom, a precise plan was required. And this plan had to take into account every column, every hall, every projection. A calculation error would have resulted in parts of the temple colliding with each other, disrupting the overall composition. But here, everything is coordinated, as if the project had been created by a team of architects with modern tools. One of the mysteries is the speed of the temple's construction. Some researchers believe it could have been carved in a relatively short time. To make this possible, many craftsmen worked simultaneously, moving in unison through the layers. But how did they coordinate their work? How did they ensure the lines matched perfectly when working from different directions? This remains unclear. Another question is how the craftsmen removed the enormous volumes of rock. Thousands of tons of stone had to be removed, all by hand or with simple equipment. Imagine people cutting rock, lifting blocks of stone, and hauling them out of mines day after day without the machinery we consider ordinary. Their labor must have been incredibly difficult, but where are the traces of this work? Where are the enormous heaps of rock? Almost no trace remains. Some halls inside the temple give the impression of an artificial cave. High ceilings, smooth walls, and evenly spaced columns. Everything seems designed as a single artistic image. In some places, the light falls in such a way as to create the feeling of a living stage. The ancient masters clearly considered not only the strength, but also the play of light, creating a unique atmosphere within the temple. Legends surrounding Kailasanatha claim the temple was created by divine inspiration. But even if we disregard the legends, the fact remains. The architects possessed knowledge that is difficult to explain. They knew how not only to build, but also to anticipate the behavior of stone, its weaknesses, and stress points. Without a deep understanding of the rock structure, such carving would have been impossible. Some parts of the temple appear to have been worked like wood. The steps are perfectly even, and the columns appear chiseled, though they are not chiseled, but hewn. This creates the impression that the craftsmen possessed incredible patience and strength to work the stone as if it were soft. Today, the temple stands open to the world, and everyone who enters feels its grandeur. The high walls seem to look down on you, reminding you that before you stands the labor of thousands of unknown people. Their names are forgotten, but their work has survived centuries, preserved through heat, wind, and rain. Kailasanatha is a place where reality seems impossible. The temple wasn't built, but rather freed from the rock. It was as if the craftsmen had liberated a hidden sanctuary within the mountain, waiting for its time. This work requires not only strength, but also astonishing vision. They had to imagine the temple within the rock even before the first piece was cut. This is precisely what makes the temple so striking. It's not just grand, it's impossible. Its creation challenges our understanding of ancient technologies. It's one of those places where you sense that human capabilities can surpass anything that seems realistic. And while scientists continue to study its structure, the most important thing remains clear. Kailasanatha preserves the knowledge of people who possess skills lost over time, the singing pillars of Vithala. In the city of Hampi, amid the ruins of an ancient kingdom, stands a temple where the stone can sing. This isn't a poetic comparison. There really are columns inside that emit resonant notes when lightly struck. Each column sounds its own unique sound, as if a musical instrument were hidden within the stone. And this is precisely what makes the Vithala temple one of India's most unusual mysteries. The columns look like ordinary stone pillars. They are decorated with carvings, supporting ceilings, and creating halls and corridors. But inside, they behave differently than you'd expect from solid stone. If you touch one with your fingers, it emits a slight vibration. If you gently strike it with a wooden stick, a note is heard. If you walk along a row of columns, you can hear a series of different sounds that combine to form a melody. The column's structure is complex. Each consists of several parts that appear solid from the outside, but some researchers believe the interior is structured differently. The inner part may be thinner, while the outer part is denser, creating the effect of a musical instrument. But how exactly the craftsman achieved this combination remains a mystery. The stone is too hard to precisely calibrate its internal structure with primitive tools. One of the column's unique features is that their sound is unlike the resonance of ordinary stone. Typically, striking a stone produces a short, dull response, but here the sound is pure, even, and possessing a special depth. It seems as if the vibrations are transmitted not only through the column, but throughout the entire hall. This creates the sensation that the temple breathes music. Scientists have attempted to explain this phenomenon. They've tested the stone's density, its composition, and the shape of the columns. But any test yields only a partial explanation. Yes, the stone can produce sound. Yes, a certain shape amplifies vibrations. But how did the ancient masters know that this particular shape and this particular arrangement would produce a musical effect? And most importantly, why did they choose to use this technique here? The temple housing the singing columns was a place of special significance. It is surrounded by courtyards, galleries, and numerous statues. Every detail is meticulously crafted. It seems the craftsman wanted not only to create a place for rituals, but also to imbue it with a special sense of presence. Music here could have been part of the spiritual experience. Imagine a hall filled with the voices of stone, resonating under the touch of the priests. Some halls are designed to amplify the sound of the columns. The vaults reflect the vibrations, transforming them into a soft musical background. Perhaps the ancient masters calculated the interplay of sound and created the architecture so that each note had its role. It's almost a theatrical approach, but in stone architecture. What's also interesting is that the columns can't be made to sound identical, even if they look similar. Each one has its own distinct voice. Some are low-pitched, others high-pitched, and still others produce short notes. It's reminiscent of a set of instruments made from the same type of stone, but tuned differently. But where are the traces of tuning? Where are the instruments the craftsman used to measure the tone? Nothing of the sort has been found. The purpose of the columns remains unclear. They could have been ritual instruments. They could have been a means of communication through sound. They could have been an element of entertainment or a demonstration of skill. Perhaps the music of the stone was used during important ceremonies when sound enhanced the ritual. Music held a special significance in ancient cultures, and here it seems to be woven into the architecture itself. The Vithala temple itself is also full of mysteries. Its carved walls are covered in incredible detail. Ornaments, scenes from legends, depictions of animals and people, everything is executed with precision and subtlety. Every detail breathes movement, creating the sense that the craftsman saw the temple not just as a building, but as a living space. Today, touching the columns is officially prohibited to protect them from damage. But even without hearing its song, the temple leaves a powerful impression. It seems to preserve the memory of the sounds that once filled it, sounds that could change the atmosphere and influence the feelings of the people who gathered here for centuries. The singing columns remind us that ancient masters understood stone not only as a material, but as a part of the world capable of giving voice. They sensed its vibrations and knew how it would sound in this or that form. This knowledge could be passed down from generation to generation, but then it disappeared, leaving only the result, a stunning combination of music and architecture. Today, the Vithala temple stands amidst ruins, but even ravaged by time, it retains a sense of mystery. Its columns are not simply parts of a building, but a reminder of a hidden art, an art that combines sound, stone, and human craftsmanship into a single, harmonious whole. And as long as this temple stands, it reminds us that ancient civilizations understood the world more deeply than we can imagine. Acoustic phenomena of Golconda. On the summit of a stone hill, amidst ramparts and high bastions, stands an ancient fortress that holds one of South India's most extraordinary secrets. Golconda is famous not only for its architecture and legends of untold treasures, but also for the fact that sound here lives by its own rules. Within the fortress, there are points where a simple clap of hands transforms into a clear, long-range signal, audible as high as the Great Bastion. The most famous acoustic effect is located at the entrance to the inner complex. It's a spacious arch beneath which one simply claps their hands. Something strange happens. The sound rises up the stone corridors and reaches the top of the complex, traveling an incredible distance. There, on the elevated platform, it can be heard as clearly as if the clapping occurred right next to them. This isn't a legend, but a real effect that is still demonstrated today. The fortress's stone walls have a complex shape. Some sections form semicircular niches, others long galleries, and still others massive towers connected by passages. It seems as if all this was designed to ensure sound traveled along specific trajectories. But how could the masters have thought of this in advance? And was it truly intentional? Researchers believe the acoustic effect may be a combination of the shape of the vaults, the angle of the walls, and the structure of the stone. The sound reflects off the surfaces, is amplified, directed upward, and concentrated at a specific point. But even if this is explained by physics, the question remains, is this a coincidence or a subtle calculation? To intentionally create such an effect, one must precisely understand how sound will behave under different conditions. Today, this is achieved using sophisticated instruments and computer models. But the ancient masters of Golconda worked without such technology. They must have possessed a unique sense of space to create such acoustic corridors. This is a rare skill that has not been fully preserved. Golconda's acoustic features served not only a display of artistry, but also practical purposes. Clapping hands at the entrance could have been a signal to guards. It allowed them to monitor the movement of people and warn of approaching guests or danger. If this was truly part of the security system, then the fortress could be described as a place where sound was transformed into a tool of protection. But beyond the main effect, Golconda features other unusual acoustic zones. In some rooms, you can quietly whisper near one wall, and the sound will be heard on the opposite side, despite the vast space between. In other places, the sound disappears, as if dissolving into thin air. These zones create the impression that the fortress space has a life of its own. In one of the courtyards, there's a spot where the sound of footsteps is strangely amplified, turning into a deep rumble. If you pass a wall, it seems as if the walls themselves are echoing back from the depths. This creates the feeling that you're not just looking at a stone fortress, but at a vast resonant instrument controlled by the architecture. Golconda's corridors also exhibit unusual behavior. Some transmit sound in such a way that it's difficult to determine its source. A person can walk along one gallery and their footsteps will be heard in another, even though they are tens of meters and several turns away. These effects may have helped the fortress's defenders track people's movements. One of the most enigmatic places is located inside a huge hall where the vaulted ceiling creates incredible acoustics. Standing in the center of the hall, you can speak in a barely audible voice, and the sound will reverberate, amplifying the effect as if you were speaking loudly. But if you do the same at the edge of the hall, the sound will be muffled and faint. This demonstrates that the masters not only studied the space, but also knew how to use it. Today, Golconda remains a unique architectural monument. People come here to see the fortress, walk its galleries, and experience the acoustic phenomena with their own ears. Even after extensive research, there's no definitive answer. Was it a coincidence or deliberate design? What led to these effects? Standing by the arch where a simple clap transforms into a powerful sound, it's hard to believe it's simply a play of form. It seems as if the fortress was created with secret knowledge, understood only by the masters of its time. To this day, Golconda remains a place where sound becomes a mystery and stone becomes a conductor. These acoustic phenomena are more than just a curious detail. They demonstrate that the ancient builders may have possessed knowledge that is now lost, knowledge that combined architecture, space, and sound into a single astonishing system. Therefore, Golconda is one of those secrets of India that continues to amaze and inspire those who visit its walls. Astronomical instruments of Jantar Mantar. In the very center of the old city stands a complex that looks as if it were built not by architects, but by gigantic mathematicians. High walls with sloping surfaces, enormous arches, steps leading to the sky, round pits with markings. None of this is decoration or a temple. These are instruments created to observe the movements of celestial bodies, and therein lies their secret. They produce remarkably accurate results, despite being built entirely of stone. Upon entering the Jantar Mantar grounds, you feel as if you've entered a strange stone garden, where every figure has a hidden meaning. Some instruments resemble staircases to nowhere. Others are giant sundials, capable of telling time with an accuracy that astonishes modern humans. But most importantly, this complex allows one to measure the positions of the sun, moon, and stars without the use of lenses, mirrors, or metal instruments. The most famous instrument is a huge triangular stand that reaches toward the sky. Its inclined plane is oriented to calculate shadows with astonishing accuracy. This shadow can be used to determine the time, the position of the sun, and even certain aspects of the movement of celestial bodies. All calculations are embedded in the stand's angles, lengths, and height. It feels like you're looking at a frozen mathematical formula. There are other unique instruments too. Some are circular depressions with markings, inside which an observer could trace the path of a star by its reflected shadow. Others are complex combinations of walls and levels, allowing one to record the rotation of the celestial sphere. Each is designed to be operated entirely manually, observing light and shadow. The main question is how the craftsman achieved such precision. Building these instruments requires more than just a knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. One must understand how the stone will behave in the sun, how the shadow will change at different times of the year, and how the climate will influence it. The slightest error in angle or height would render the instrument useless. But here, everything is so precisely correlated with the position of the celestial sphere that some instruments still function to this day. One gets the sense that the architects possessed a knowledge we can't always accurately reconstruct. They used simple materials, but applied complex principles. Their calculations accounted for the movements of celestial bodies with a precision usually associated with metal instruments and lenses. But here, everything operates on the interplay of light and shadow in stone geometry. Some researchers believe that the creators of Jantar Mantar not only built the instruments, but also conducted numerous observations to verify their accuracy. To do this, they had to observe the sky for years, noting the slightest changes. Perhaps this knowledge was passed down through generations of craftsmen. This explains why the complex appears so well thought out and complete. What's also interesting is that the instrument's shapes only seem strange at first glance. Stand at the right point and look at them from the right angle, and everything falls into place. Stairs become markings, arcs become precise scales, and recesses become projection systems. This space demands interaction. A person must be part of the process, otherwise the instrument remains a silent stone figure. Each stone instrument has its own purpose. One captures the sun's shadow, another points to a star, a third tracks time, and a fourth calculates seasonal cycles. Taken together, the entire complex functions as a vast observatory, with each element connected to the sky. And all of this is created without mechanisms, moving parts, or metal components. Some instruments are too large to be operated by a single person. They were probably intended for large astronomical events, where several observers recorded the movements of celestial bodies simultaneously. Imagine a group of people carefully observing a shadow falling on a marking, recording its every movement. This required not only knowledge, but also patience. Today, Jantar Mantar remains a working observatory at certain times of the year. Certain celestial phenomena can still be observed here using stone instruments, just as the ancient masters did. This reminds us that astronomy was never just a science. It was part of a culture connected to the rhythms of nature. The complex is striking in that it combines art, architecture, and science. Its creators did not separate one from the other. For them, observing the sky was not just calculation, but part of their understanding of the world. They created instruments that were intended to serve not just one generation, but centuries. Standing among these stone giants, you feel a strange calm. The sun moves across the sky, shadows creep slowly along the precise stone lines, and time seems to flow differently here. Jantar Mantar is a reminder that people of the past carefully observed the sky, combining craftsmanship with observation and transforming science into an architectural poem. This ancient observatory remains one of India's most enigmatic mysteries. It demonstrates that precision can be achieved even without modern technology, through a combination of knowledge, patience, and the ability to see the world's patterns. Lake Lonar, deep in the village, surrounded by dark forests and dry plains, lies a round lake that appears ordinary at first glance. But upon closer inspection, it becomes clear. This is no ordinary body of water. It lies within a huge, bowl-shaped crater with almost perfect steep walls, and its water possesses properties that have long baffled scientists. Lonar is a place where nature breaks the rules. The first thing that catches your eye is the lake's shape. It's perfectly round, as if someone had pressed down on the earth with enormous force. It's hard to imagine a natural process that could have created such a shape so smoothly and precisely. The crater itself is surrounded by dense rock, and its structure suggests it was once subjected to a powerful impact. But who or what could have left such a mark? The water's surface appears calm, but its composition is unusual. Two layers can be found in the same lake, barely mixing with each other. The upper layer is fresher, while the lower layer is surprisingly salty and alkaline. This separation is extremely rare and suggests that the lake lives by its own rules. It seems to preserve the memory of the force that created it thousands of years ago. Lonar's water possesses a property that still evokes astonishment. It is home to microorganisms found nowhere else nearby. These tiny creatures can withstand conditions that would be lethal to other life forms. They have adapted to the high alkalinity and salinity, and some live only in the deep layers of the lake where there is almost no oxygen. Scientists studying these micro-life forms believe the lake may have become a kind of nature's laboratory. A powerful impact once created a crater, which developed a unique environment. There are no familiar rivers bringing fresh water, nor are there large outflows. Therefore, the lake develops independently, creating unusual conditions that allow rare life forms to thrive. But beyond the unusual water chemistry, the lake is surrounded by rocks that appear to have been melted. Some rocks have the shape of glassy fragments, as if melted at high temperatures. This doesn't resemble the normal action of sun or fire. The formation of such minerals requires colossal heat, which could only have been generated by a sudden, powerful impact. Locals have told legends about the lake for centuries. Some said a fiery object fell from the sky at this spot. Others claimed a clash between a celestial being and a demon occurred here. Still others claimed the lake was a trace left by divine power. But no matter how different the legends, they all share a common theme. The lake appeared suddenly and as a result of tremendous force. As researchers delved deeper into the lake, they found evidence that the impact was truly colossal. Rocks along the crater's rim are cracked as if they had been subjected to a pressure wave. Some layers reveal minerals that only form at extremely high temperatures. All of this paints a picture of an unexpected and powerful event that transformed the Earth. Interestingly, Lake Lonar remains chemically active. Its water changes seasonally. Sometimes it becomes brighter, almost emerald, sometimes darker and denser. During certain periods, the surface becomes covered with a thin film that disappears as suddenly as it appeared. These changes are associated with microbial activity and chemical reactions in the water, but not all the processes are fully explained. The surrounding crater also adds to the mystery. The vegetation along its edges differs from that of the surrounding area. Some plants thrive only near the lake, even though the soil there is saltier and heavier. This creates the feeling that the lake influences life around it, creating a special zone. The crater itself is so deep that descending to the water feels like entering a different environment. The air becomes more humid, the smells stronger, and even the sounds change. Footsteps begin to echo dully along the walls, and the wind passing over the crater creates unusual vibrations. This place seems to be alive with a special energy, elusive but clearly perceptible. Today, Lonar Lake is one of the most unusual places in India. It combines the traces of an ancient impact, unique biological life, and the mysterious properties of its water. Standing on its shore, you feel a strange sensation, as if before you is not just a piece of nature, but the frozen history of a huge event that occurred many centuries ago. Lonar reminds us that the Earth holds within itself powers we rarely consider, and that even the most tranquil places can conceal traces of events that took place in eras before written records were written. This place remains one of India's mysteries, where nature speaks louder than words. Geoglyphs of the Thar Desert. In one of the driest and hottest regions of India, where sand and sun reign supreme, there are signs that seem to have been left by the hand of a giant. Long lines, spirals, turns, and entire patterns stretch across the desert surface, visible only from above. These geoglyphs are so large that a pedestrian wouldn't notice their shape. They only become apparent when viewed from above, taking in the vast expanse of land. These lines don't look like random marks of wind or erosion. They are smooth, precise, and spread over many kilometers. In some places, they form shapes reminiscent of circles, squares, or waves. In others, they form complex interlacings reminiscent of ancient symbols. All of this creates the feeling that we are looking at a carefully designed system, intended to be perceived not from ground level, but from above. The geoglyphs were discovered relatively recently thanks to satellite imagery. Until then, no one suspected that a vast drawing was hidden in the sand. When researchers began exploring the area, they realized that the lines stretched for tens of kilometers. Some of them were of an unimaginable length. They stretched from horizon to horizon, maintaining their alignment and direction. But who could have created such gigantic forms? And most importantly, why? There were human settlements in these areas, but they were small, and the people led a nomadic lifestyle. Creating geoglyphs of such scale required a high degree of organization and a clear understanding of how the design would appear from above. This suggests that the creators of these lines possessed an unusual way of thinking that transcended conventional boundaries. Some geoglyphs consist of parallel lines that extend for kilometers. Others are made up of intersecting arcs that create a sense of movement. There are also figures resembling spirals, as if swirled by the hand of a gigantic artist. But on the ground, these forms are almost invisible. Standing nearby, one sees only ditches or small depressions. Only a view from above reveals their meaning. The difficulty of the study lies in the fact that sand is a capricious material. It can obscure lines or, conversely, emphasize them. Therefore, many patterns may be partially lost or distorted. But those visible today give the impression of design, not chance. Some researchers speculate that the geoglyphs may have been part of rituals. Perhaps people created them to show something to the heavenly powers. When viewed from above, they appear as signs pointing skyward. But this is only a hypothesis. There is no direct evidence to support this theory. It's believed that the lines may have been used as landmarks. It's difficult to find your way in the desert. The landscape changes and the sand hides tracks. Perhaps these geoglyphs served as roads or signposts. But then again, their enormous size suggests they weren't intended solely for pedestrians. Other researchers see mathematical intent in them. Some lines run at precise angles, others intersect, creating figures with astonishing precision. This suggests that the authors had a good knowledge of geometry and could apply it to vast areas. But the lack of written evidence complicates the search for an answer. When you look at a map of geoglyphs, you get the feeling that they're interconnected. Their lines converge, diverge, and form a network. It's not chaos, but structure. A structure that no one has yet been able to fully explain. Today, the geoglyphs of the Thar Desert remain one of India's most underappreciated mysteries. They are less well known than other ancient phenomena, but their significance may be enormous. They reveal how ancient people viewed the world, how they understood space, and how they interacted with the earth on a level beyond the ordinary eye. Standing amid the sand, it's impossible to see the drawing. But from a height, the geoglyphs come to life, transforming into gigantic symbols. This creates the sense that the ancient masters wanted to leave a message not only for their time, but also for the future. A message we are only just beginning to decipher. Ellora underground tunnels. The most common theme surrounding the grandiose Ellora complex is the famous rock-cut temple. But beneath the surface lies an equally mysterious element, a network of tunnels, passages, and unfinished excavations that extend deep into the rock. These spaces are not mentioned in ancient texts, have no clear purpose, and still raise questions. Why did the craftsmen begin creating these underground passages, and why did they suddenly cease work? As you descend into these dark passages, you sense a shift in the space. Unlike the temples with their carvings and lofty symbolism, silence and dampness reign here. Tool marks are visible on the walls, as if the work had stopped yesterday. The stone is unusually alive. You can discern the directions in which the craftsmen struck their stones and places where they may have planned to widen the passages. It feels as if the project was vast, yet unfinished. Some passages are so narrow that one can only move sideways through them. Others are unusually wide, as if designed for large groups of people. There are sections where the walls begin to diverge, creating the beginnings of halls. And there are others where the tunnel ends abruptly, as if the craftsmen had been working on something important but suddenly abandoned the site unfinished. Sometimes it seems as if the underground section of Ellora was conceived as a system of rooms connecting different temples. Perhaps the craftsmen intended to create a network of passages leading from one sanctuary to another, hidden from the scorching sun. But there are no traces of any control over this system. No markings, no inscriptions, no explicit construction instructions. It seems as if the creation of the tunnels was a secret even to those working in the above-ground halls. In some places, you can see the outlines of columns. They're only sketched out, not finished. This is surprising. Columns were usually crafted with precision and care, but here, work seems to have stopped at the first stage. This suggests that the underground halls may have been part of a grand plan that, for unknown reasons, remained just that, a plan. There are theories that the underground passages served a practical purpose. Perhaps they were water channels, of which there are many at Ellora. Perhaps the builders intended to create a drainage system or hidden reservoirs. But the shape of the tunnels isn't always suited to such purposes. Some are too high, others too narrow, and still others are positioned in such a way that water simply couldn't flow through them. Other researchers believe the tunnels may have had religious significance. They may have been intended for secret rituals, conducted in silence and darkness, away from light. However, there are no traces of altars, drawings, or ritual objects. The passages appear crude and unadorned, as if they were created for the very first stages of work. What's particularly interesting is that some passages lead to unremarkable stone ledges. They don't connect to the halls, don't reach the surface, and don't serve as ventilation. These dead ends create a sense of incompleteness. It's as if the craftsmen were studying the rock's structure, making test cuts and testing its strength. But even if the tunnels are the result of experimental work, why are there so many of them, and why are they located so deep? It seems as if a group of craftsmen had a special commission that was never completed. Perhaps the temple complex was intended to have underground halls of a scale we cannot even imagine. Strange acoustics can be heard inside the tunnels. Footsteps reverberate differently depending on the shape and depth of the passage. Sometimes the sound seems to escape to the side, sometimes it disappears into the wall. This creates the sensation of a living space where each niche reflects sound in its own way. Perhaps the craftsman studied these effects to use them in future construction. Another mystery is the tools. Marks on the stone indicate that the tunnels were carved with astonishing regularity. The blows to the rock were at a uniform angle, as if the craftsmen were using a precise rhythmic method. This speaks of immense experience and confidence. But why did the work stop? Some researchers speculate that the work was interrupted by a change in rulers or a shift in religious preferences. Perhaps the new leadership decided to redirect resources to other projects. But even if this is the case, it is strange that no surviving mention of such a large-scale underground system exists. Today, the underground tunnels of Ellora remain a place to be entered with caution. It is a space where the walls bear traces of unfinished work, where questions echo with unanswered questions. These tunnels are a reminder that every great complex can have an unseen side, and that sometimes there are more secrets underground than above. Megalithic circles of Chambal. Deep in the Indian plains, where the hills rise in gentle waves and long, dry winds whip the grass, lie circles of rough stones. At first glance they appear random, but a closer look reveals that these are no haphazard piles. They are megalithic structures that stretch across hills and valleys, forming a network of enigmatic stone circles. Each one bears the traces of ancient activity, the origins of which no one fully understands. The stones that make up the circles appear simple. They are unadorned with carvings and have no intricate shapes, but their placement is thoughtful. Within each circle, the stones are arranged in a manner reminiscent of ancient observation structures. Some circles contain a central stone, while others are arranged in 2 or even 3 rings. Sizes vary. Some circles can be circled in a minute, while others are so large that their full form is only revealed from above. The Chambal region has long been famous for its mysteries. Traces of settlements about which almost nothing is known are found here. Some archaeologists believe the circles may have been part of rituals. Ancient people may have gathered here to mark the changes of seasons, observe the stars, and perform rites of passage. But if this is indeed the case, why are the circles arranged so strangely? They don't form neat rows, but this scattered arrangement has its own rhythm, its own logic. Some researchers suggest that the circles were connected to funerary rites. They may have served as memorial sites or points where important ceremonies took place. However, traces of actual burials are not found in all circles. In some places, only depressions are visible, as if someone had intentionally prepared the sites for future work but never completed it. The shape of the circles raises questions. Many of them are oriented towards sunrise or sunset. Some are aligned with the cardinal points. This suggests that their creators possessed knowledge of the movements of celestial bodies. But no one knows how profound this knowledge was. Was it part of an ancient observational system? Or were the circles merely symbols associated with the cycles of nature? The possibility remains open. If you listen to local legends, you'll hear stories about the circles being created by beings who came from the road of the winds. This is an old expression used to describe an ancient people about whom there are no written records. The Chambal people believed that they lived in close connection with nature, and the circles were their way of marking sacred territories. These legends don't provide scientific answers, but they reflect the respect with which the inhabitants treat the stone structures. The stones themselves show signs of workmanship. They are not perfectly cut, but their surfaces are sometimes smoothed, as if they had been worked on for a long time. The stones raise the question, how were they moved? Some are too heavy for a single person to lift. But no traces of machinery or tools that could have helped move such boulders have been found in the area. Over time, the circles became shrouded in mystery. In some areas, several circles are arranged so that their lines coincide with directions leading to other ancient monuments. This creates the image of an entire system that could span several hills and valleys. Perhaps the ancient builders connected the circles, creating points through which important routes passed. However, the explanation remains elusive. If the circles were roads, why are they circular? If they were sacred sites, why are some of them located near otherwise ordinary, unremarkable sites? And if the circles were intended for observation, why are there no clear signs of systematic celestial surveying? Standing inside one of the circles creates a strange sensation. The seemingly inanimate stones create a closed space in which the sound of footsteps changes. Sometimes you seem to hear your own breathing louder. Sometimes the sound travels upward, reflecting off an invisible dome. Perhaps ancient people felt the same way. Some circles are positioned so that their centers offer a wide view of the surrounding hills. This may suggest that the circles were used as observation points. But why observe from here? What was happening around them that required such attention? There are no answers. During excavations, small objects are sometimes found in the circles, pieces of pottery, baked stone, and small figurines. These finds hint at human presence, but they don't explain what they did or why they left the circles in this condition. Some objects may have been part of rituals, others were lost accidentally. All of this adds to the mystery rather than solving it. Today, the megalithic circles of Chambal remain one of those mysteries that seem simple until you look closely. They stand silent and motionless, as if nothing is happening, but hidden within each circle is a trace of the thoughts of the people who lived here many centuries ago. People who left no texts, but left behind a form. These circles aren't just stone structures. They're traces of a consciousness that knew how to see the earth differently. And until we understand their purpose, they'll remain stone questions on the surface of the desert hills. Stone spheroids of Mizoram. In the gorges of Mizoram, amid dense jungle and damp slopes, lie stones whose shapes astonish even those accustomed to natural wonders. These rock formations are almost perfect in shape. They are round and smooth, as if carved by the hands of master craftsmen. Some are as big as a human head, others are the size of small boulders. But most importantly, they lie in groups, as if they were once brought here deliberately. When you approach one of these spheroids, it becomes clear. This is no random rock fragment. The surface is smooth without sharp edges, as if the stone had been turned and polished to a perfect shape. But how could nature have created such spheres? And if they were the work of man, where are the traces of processing? No carvings, no notches, no rough lines that would have been left by ancient tools. Some of the stones have small indentations or streaks, but their arrangement doesn't resemble the marks of blows or cutting. They rather resemble natural growth lines, like those of a tree, only in stone form. This leads researchers to wonder whether these spheres were formed naturally or whether ancient craftsmen used some technique we cannot reconstruct. In rare places, you can see enormous spheroids, partially buried in the ground. Their size is so great that it seems they've lain there for centuries. Trees grow around them, their roots twining around the stones as if guarding them. This creates the impression that the stone spheres are part of the landscape, but the shapes themselves are too perfect to be entirely natural. Some researchers suggest that the spheroids could have been the result of a long natural process. Water, wind, and soil movement could have shaped the stones, gradually rounding them. But in that case, they would have had varying shapes, more oval, angular, or with jagged edges. However, most spheroids here exhibit remarkable symmetry. There's a hypothesis that the spheroids were part of rituals or ancient cultural heritage. Perhaps craftsmen carved them for use in ceremonies. The stone has always held deep significance in local traditions. But the question arises again, where are the tool marks? Even the most careful carvers would have left small grooves or marks of processing. There's nothing of the sort here. Their concentration is also interesting. The spheroids are not scattered randomly. They often occur in groups, sometimes several dozen. This suggests a warehouse or a place where ancient people would have transported finished stone objects. But if this is true, why is there so much work, yet the use of these spheres has never been discovered? There are no stands, niches, or temple complexes nearby. When researchers examined the internal structure of some spheroids, they found that many of them were composed of layers of varying density. This is odd. If the rock had formed naturally, the layers should have been chaotic. But here, they are arranged evenly, as if the rocks were created gradually, through a process of slow growth. This looks more like a geological miracle than human work. Some spheroids, according to geologists, may be incredibly old. They could have begun to form when these lands were uninhabited. But if so, why are similar formations rarely found in neighboring regions? Why does Mizoram contain so many of them, and in such good condition? Locals consider these stones frozen creatures. Their legends say that giants once roamed here, carrying round stones to build their homes. But one day, something happened, and the giants, along with their loads, turned to stone. The legend is beautiful, but it doesn't explain the origin of their perfect shape. When a researcher stands among dozens of spheroids, he gets the feeling that these are not just stones. They resemble frozen imprints of movement, as if something round rolled across the ground and left behind traces. But this is only an image. In reality, the stones are motionless, and no one knows where they came from or why they were collected here. Some spheroids lie in areas where the soil is loose and unstable. Moving them would require enormous force. However, there are no traces of a road or any signs of work nearby. This means that either the stones were deposited there naturally, or ancient people possessed unknown means to move such masses. There's another interesting detail. Some spheroids are so perfectly balanced that touching them creates the sensation of a slight shift. They don't roll, but the visceral sense of balance within the stone makes one wonder. Perhaps their centers of gravity are perfectly positioned. This again raises the question, is this a coincidence or is it designed? Today, the stone spheroids of Mizoram remain one of India's most poorly understood mysteries. They are not as well known as major temples or ancient cities, but their enigma is every bit as profound. They conceal something that eludes explanation: a perfect shape, a complex structure, and a strange concentration. Standing among them, you feel a sense of respect for nature or for those who could create such forms. The spheres appear simple, but it is precisely in this simplicity that a depth of mystery lies, traces of distant eras left on the Earth's surface. And while scientists continue to study these stones, one fact remains. The Mizoram spheroids force us to acknowledge that the world holds forms that sometimes defy human understanding. Bas-reliefs of Mamallapuram. On the coast, where the waves of the warm sea crash against granite slabs, stands an ancient complex whose walls seem to come alive in the sunlight. Here, in Mamallapuram, bas-reliefs are carved into gigantic stone surfaces, astonishing not only in their craftsmanship, but also in their scale. These are not just carvings, they are narratives stretching for tens of meters, a story told without a single word. But the most enigmatic thing about these bas-reliefs is how they were created and what they are meant to convey. The main bas-relief is a huge stone wall, several times the height of a man. It depicts people, animals, deities, trees, and mythical scenes. Each figure seems to move, as if the stone ceases to be static and becomes a frozen moment of great action. But why did the artist choose this particular subject? And why was it executed on such a scale? If you get closer, you'll notice the stunning detail. The fine folds of clothing, the facial expressions, the lines on the animals' bodies. Everything is carved with such subtlety that it seems impossible to achieve with simple tools. Some figures are positioned in such a way as to create a sense of depth. The stone seems to take on multiple layers. Some characters step back, while others seem to step forward. The bas-reliefs are not random drawings, however. There are scenes of people standing in prayer. There are animals moving in a single line as if participating in a procession. There are strange figures that are difficult to interpret definitively. They resemble creatures from ancient legends, and their poses seem symbolic. Many researchers debate the meaning of these scenes, but there is no consensus. One of the mysteries is the central vertical crack that runs through the entire bas-relief. But upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that this is more than just a crack. The artists incorporated it into the composition, transforming it into a symbolic waterfall. The stone, a natural fracture, became part of the story, as if a river flows between worlds. This speaks to a keen understanding of the nature of stone and an ability to weave its characteristics into the artistic design. The technique also raises questions. How did the artisans carve such deep and precise lines? How did they create three-dimensional figures on a vertical surface where one misstep could destroy an entire fragment? The tools of the time were simple, but their use required incredible precision. The Mamallapuram bas-reliefs look as if they were created by a team of people with vast experience and a shared vision. There are details that are particularly striking. For example, some figures are depicted as if the artists understood muscle movement and body proportions to a level we associate with later eras. The animals appear lifelike. Elephants, lions, monkeys, their poses convey character and emotion. These are not simply decorative images, but entire characters frozen in stone. Why did they decide to tell such a complex story here, on this enormous flat rock? Some theorize that the bas-relief depicts an important mythological event. Perhaps the artists were trying to convey the idea of the connection between heaven, earth, and water. But there are no inscriptions or texts that clearly explain the plot. All we have is the bas-relief itself, which speaks its own language. What's also interesting is that next to these gigantic images are unfinished fragments. On some slabs, only the outlines of future figures, barely sketched lines, are visible. This demonstrates the work process. First, the general design was created, then gradually deepened and details were added. But why were some of the works unfinished? Did the group of craftsmen disappear? Did the commission change? There is no answer. Standing before the Mamallapuram bas-reliefs, you get the feeling that you're looking at not just a work of art, but a stone chronicle. But it's a chronicle without words. It conveys emotion, movement, life, but offers no direct explanation. And therein lies its strength. In the evening, when the sun sets over the sea, shadows fall on the carved figures, and the bas-reliefs seem to come alive. Light glides across the reliefs, highlighting one face after another. This spectacle is reminiscent of an ancient performance that has been going on for centuries. The Mamallapuram bas-reliefs are a mystery not only of how they were created, but also of why. They remind us that stone can be a page of history when, in the hands of a master, it becomes a narrative. And while we search for answers, these stone scenes continue to live their own secret life, preserving the voice of an era we still haven't fully understood. Guruvan magnetic anomaly. On the edge of a small village, surrounded by fields and dusty roads, lies a place that baffles anyone who comes here for the first time. It seems like an ordinary piece of land, a gentle rise, a modest slope, and a short stretch of old road. But stop here, and familiar laws begin to behave differently. Compasses are deflected, metal objects behave strangely, and water poured onto a flat surface seems to flow against the slope. This is the Guruvan magnetic anomaly, one of India's quietest yet most baffling mysteries. Travelers passing through this place have noticed strange things for centuries. People said their carts would begin to roll up the slope. Others claimed to feel a slight pressure in the air, as if space were becoming denser. But no one paid much attention to these stories until researchers began studying the place in earnest. The first thing that catches your eye is that the slope along which objects move does indeed appear to be tilted in one direction. But if you measure the level, it becomes clear that the opposite is true. What appears to be an ascent is actually a descent. It's an optical illusion, but it doesn't explain everything. Even when the illusion is taken into account, some objects continue to behave inexplicably. A regular compass in Guruvanpalli behaves particularly strangely. Instead of pointing steadily north, the needle begins to tremble, deflect, freeze, and then abruptly change direction. In another place, such a behavior would indicate a malfunction, but here the same behavior occurs with various compasses. This indicates the presence of a certain force influencing magnetic fields. Scientists hypothesize that a large deposit of magnetic rock might be located underground. If such rock is shallow, it could indeed influence the compass needle's direction. But soil tests revealed a surprising result. No large deposits were present. The rock underground was ordinary, without any elevated metal content. This means the compass needle's deviation lies neither on the surface nor in the rock. Another mystery is the movement of water. If you pour water into a small container and place it on a plot of land, the water sometimes begins to flow in directions it shouldn't. At first glance, this seems like an illusion caused by the slope. But upon precise measurement, it must be acknowledged. The movement actually does sometimes contradict the expected direction. This is unusual and requires explanation. Locals believe the place possesses its own power. They call it the land where the world turns. Legends tell of an ancient stone that supposedly held energy capable of altering the state of the surrounding space. But neither the stone nor any other ancient objects have been found here. All that can be seen is an ordinary road, trees, and earth. Some researchers believe the explanation may lie in the shape of the terrain. Sometimes the shapes of hills and valleys create strong optical effects that influence the perception of distance and slope. A person perceives an ascent, but is actually descending. Combined with the features of the horizon, this can create the impression that objects are moving upward. But even with this theory in mind, several oddities remain. For example, metal objects deflect as if pulled by an invisible force, or the unusual response of compasses, which isn't always explained by the distribution of magnetic lines. There's another interesting fact. The anomaly is more pronounced at certain times of the day than at others. The effects are much more noticeable in the morning than in the evening. This suggests that solar radiation or soil temperature may influence the magnetism in this area. However, no consistent patterns have yet been identified. When a researcher enters the area, they can feel a slight vibration in the ground. It's not strong, but distinct if you listen closely. It doesn't sound like machinery or natural springs. Rather, it's an internal tremor that gives the feeling that something is moving or changing underground. However, no signs of underground voids or currents were found. Some scientists have suggested that the underground structure may be more complex than it appears. Perhaps there's a layer of rock beneath the soil with unusual properties that influences the movement of magnetic lines. Or perhaps there are minerals present in concentrations too low to be detectable in samples, but sufficient to influence compasses. But these are just guesses. Even the most detailed soil studies have not yielded a definitive answer. When standing in an anomalous zone, the surrounding world seems slightly displaced. Trees appear slightly taller than they actually are. The horizon appears uneven, though this is barely noticeable to the naked eye. All shapes and lines seem to lean to one side, creating a sense of distorted space. This may be the result of a complex interaction of light, relief, and perspective. But combined with the effects of moving water and the deflection of arrows, it seems as if the place lives by its own laws. Locals aren't afraid of the anomaly. They consider it part of the land's character. They say the place sometimes whispers when the wind passes over the slope, and sometimes pushes when gentle waves of air rise above the soil. These are figurative descriptions, but they reflect the experiences of people who have lived near this site for generations. The Guruvanpalli magnetic anomaly reminds us that secrets can lurk even in the most inconspicuous places. You don't have to search for ancient temples or underground cities to encounter the inexplicable. Sometimes just stopping on a lonely stretch of road is enough to feel the familiar world shift slightly, hinting at forces we know little about. Metallurgy of the Indus Valley Civilization. When talking about ancient civilizations, we usually imagine brick houses, ceramics, and jewelry, but rarely sophisticated metalworking technologies. However, traces of metalworking have been found in the Indus Valley Civilization that still baffle scientists. The inhabitants of these ancient cities knew how to smelt, mix, and shape metals to create objects of incredible strength and precision. And the mystery lies in how exactly they achieved this. Archaeologists have discovered numerous metal objects, knives, mirrors, jewelry, and small tools. All are striking in their quality. The metal is uniform, without any rough inclusions. The lines are smooth, and the edges are often even, as if the objects were crafted with finer tools than those known at the time. Most striking is their use of alloys. Indus Valley Civilization metallurgists knew how to combine copper with tin, lead, and even rare alloys, creating strong and durable materials. Some finds contain traces of complex mixtures that made the objects corrosion-resistant. How did these ancient craftsmen select the proportions? How did they know which metals could be combined? We have no written instructions to explain their methods. The forges in these ancient cities were unusually designed. They were not located on the outskirts, as is often the case, but in residential areas. This suggests that metalworking was part of everyday life. But how was the high temperature for smelting maintained? Where was the fuel stored, and how did they achieve such precise heating? There are still no answers. In some places, archaeologists have found traces of specialized furnaces. They are designed as if the artisans could control the airflow and maintain a steady heat. But the furnaces are unusual. They are smaller than would be expected for mass metal production. This suggests that the metal was processed in small batches, but with great care. Metal mirrors are particularly intriguing. These mirrors are polished to such a smooth finish that the reflection appears almost modern. Achieving this by hand is incredibly difficult, but craftsmen managed it. They used fine abrasive stones to create an even mark, then polished the surface until it shone. Such mirrors weren't just everyday objects, they may have had ritual significance. But even if so, their quality remains a mystery. Some finds indicate the use of casting. Molds for casting objects had thin channels for the metal to flow through. Such molds must be made with great care, otherwise the molten metal will not fill them completely. However, the found castings are flawless, indicating that the craftsman knew how to control the flow of metal. This indicates a profound knowledge that we can only reconstruct today. The most mysterious objects are small, fine-edged tools. They look as if they could have been used for jewelry or carving. But the metal in them is so finely crafted that the tools retain their shape even after extensive use. Achieving this requires high temperatures and precise cooling control. This process requires experience, skill, and technology about which we have incomplete data. Some researchers believe that the metallurgy of the Indus Valley Civilization was part of a broader knowledge system. Craftsmen may have passed on secrets orally without writing them down. If the knowledge was preserved by only a few groups of specialists, it would have been lost after the cities disappeared. This explains why technologies found in the Indus Valley Civilization are not always continued into later eras. But there are other questions. Why did the inhabitants of these ancient cities place so much emphasis on metal? It was used not only for utilitarian objects, but also for jewelry, ritual figurines, and everyday items. All this suggests that metal played a significant role in their culture. But how significant was its significance? Was metallurgy part of sacred knowledge? Looking at the discovered pieces, one gets the sense that the artisans strove to make them not just functional, but beautiful. Even ordinary household items are decorated with fine lines, small patterns, and carefully crafted surfaces. This indicates a special attention to the material. The metallurgy of the Indus Valley civilization remains a mystery because it was so advanced for its time. In other regions, similar levels of development were achieved later. But here, among ancient streets and quiet ruins, work once flourished that still amazes us today. Standing amid the ruins of one of the cities, one can imagine the artisans stoking the furnaces, the molten metal flowing through tiny channels into molds, and the emergence of shining objects that will endure for centuries. And it is precisely in these objects that lies part of the secret, hidden in the depths of an ancient civilization that left us its achievements, but no instructions. This mystery reminds us that ancient people may have possessed knowledge we sometimes underestimate. Their technologies were not a fluke, but part of a larger culture where craftsmanship was valued no less than art. And while we continue to explore these remnants of material culture, the metallurgy of the Indus Valley civilization remains a keystone yet to be turned. Proto-city of Mehrgarh. In western India, amidst arid plains and ancient hills, lie the remains of a settlement seemingly far too advanced for its time. Mehrgarh is one of the earliest known settlements in the region, and its mystery lies in the fact that the people here were far more skilled than one might expect given such a remote antiquity. They built houses, managed their households, practiced crafts, and created objects requiring a sophisticated understanding of materials. All of this makes Mehrgarh one of the most enigmatic proto-cities on the Indian subcontinent. A look at the excavated structures reveals that the inhabitants knew how to build more than just huts. They constructed rectangular houses with several rooms. The floors were leveled with clay, the walls were reinforced, and some rooms showed signs of specific use. This indicates that the settlement had multiple functions: storage areas, work areas, and living spaces. This organization suggests that the society already had a certain order. The everyday objects found at Mehrgarh are particularly striking. For example, some of the earliest drills were discovered here, which ancient people used to shape stone and make holes in hard minerals. Such tools indicate a high level of craftsmanship. People didn't simply use readily available materials. They created objects that required precision and attention to detail. Remains of textiles were also discovered, indicating that the inhabitants knew how to spin threads and weave fabrics. Weaving is a complex process that requires not only tools, but also knowledge of materials and fiber processing techniques. The people of Mehrgarh mastered this art even when most neighboring settlements were barely beginning to transition from hunting to agriculture. But even more surprising is the discovery of traces of early medicine in Mehrgarh. Archaeologists have discovered skulls bearing signs of dental treatment. Some teeth show small holes, carefully made with careful attention to the tooth structure. This suggests that people knew how to relieve pain and perhaps even cure illness. Such practices are difficult to imagine in such an early period, but the fact remains. The inhabitants of Mehrgarh knew how to grow crops. Traces of early agriculture have been found: grains, tools for cultivating the land, and the remains of storage facilities. They understood the plant growth cycle and knew how to store and distribute harvests. All this speaks to a highly organized workforce. This was not just a group of families, it was a proto-city where people worked together. Of particular significance are the figurines found in large numbers. They are molded from clay and come in various sizes and shapes. Some depict people, others animals. The figurines are often stylized, but the hand of a master craftsman is evident in them. They served more than just decoration, they likely had spiritual or ritual significance. But their meaning remains a mystery. The construction at Mehrgarh also raises questions. People understood how to build walls that would withstand seasonal winds and rainy days. They knew how to reinforce the corners of houses and create smooth surfaces. This knowledge couldn't have arisen by chance. It was passed on, developed, and perfected. But how did such an architectural culture emerge? Why did it appear here and not elsewhere at the time? It is believed that Mehrgar was an important exchange center. Routes between different regions may have passed through it. People brought materials here, exchanged knowledge, and shared experiences. This explains the diversity of finds, from tools to jewelry. But even if this is true, the question remains: who initiated all these achievements? Some objects found in the area were made from stones quarried far beyond the region. This suggests that the inhabitants traveled or maintained contact with distant settlements. However, such travel was difficult in those days. This suggests that the people of Mehrgar possessed sufficient resources, organization, and possibly authority to manage such processes. Standing among the ruins of Mehrgar, it's hard to imagine that all this took place in such a distant era. The earth concealed the traces of a society that knew how to plan, create, and heal. And all this without writing, without complex mechanisms, without city walls, only people and their hard work. The proto-cities of Mehrgar are a mystery about how early human skills could have developed. People lived here who left us traces of progress, but no explanations. Their tools, houses, figurines, and traces of crafts are like fragments of a larger story we are still piecing together. This mystery reminds us that civilization begins not with the invention of writing, but when people unite for a common cause. And Mehrgar is one of those places where this happened remarkably early. Stepwells of Baori. In the arid lands of western India, where seasonal rains are rare and the heat is a challenge, people once built structures that are striking not only for their beauty, but also for their engineering prowess. These structures are called stepwells, or baoris. At first glance, they look like enormous stone staircases extending deep underground. But their purpose was far more important. They served as sources of water, protected from the heat and evaporation. And therein lies their secret. The wells were built with such precision and thoughtfulness that they still evoke admiration. When you climb to the edge of one of these wells, a view opens up that seems like part of an ancient temple. The steps are arranged in even lines, descending symmetrically, forming a geometric pattern. Each step is precisely sized, designed to allow easy access to the water even when its level fluctuated. During the rainy seasons, the water rose, and during the dry seasons, it dropped, but it was always accessible. Baoris were built to retain coolness. Deep walls, closely fitting to the ground, created a natural coolness that prevented evaporation. Inner platforms served as resting places. People could sit on the steps to beat the heat, and sometimes Baoris became social centers or even ritual sites. But the most astonishing thing is the precision with which these wells were built. The steps aren't simply stacked one on top of the other. They're arranged to form a stable structure capable of withstanding the Earth's pressure. Removing even one layer would have rendered the entire structure unstable. But the craftsmen created such robust geometric designs that most Baori have survived to this day. Some stepwells have multiple levels. This means the craftsmen planned in advance how the water would change during the different seasons. They created platforms where people could descend if the water level dropped below normal. But how did they calculate this without sophisticated instruments? How did they determine how many levels were needed and what depth was sufficient to supply the entire settlement? The materials were also specially selected. For the walls, they used moisture-resistant stone. It didn't crumble or wash away. This was important as the water in the Baori stood for long periods and the walls had to withstand constant contact. But quarrying such stones required effort and organization. People transported enormous blocks over long distances and precisely placed them in the well's base. Some Baori are veritable underground palaces. Their walls contain niches, decorations, and carved patterns. This suggests that the wells were not simply utilitarian structures. They were perceived as places of power, beautiful and worthy of reverence. One of the most interesting features is that the Baori took the light paths into account. At certain times, the sun illuminates only the upper steps, while the lower ones remain in shadow almost all day. This helps retain the cool water, but it seems as if the craftsmen weren't simply building deep wells. They were also considering how the light would work at different times of the year. Some baoras exhibit unusual acoustics. Footsteps bounce off the walls, creating an echo that changes depending on the water level. During certain seasons, the sound may increase or decrease. This suggests that the wells are not just engineering structures, but also spaces with their own acoustic life. Baori are also fascinating because many of them are connected to underground canals. These canals channeled rainwater into a central well, purifying it naturally. This resembles a complex water supply system, where each part works in harmony with the others. But how could such a system have arisen without records, without plans, without written rules? There are theories that Baori creation remained a vibrant tradition. Craftsmen passed on their knowledge orally, creating structures that were the result of experience rather than mathematical calculation. But the question remains, how did they manage to maintain such proportions, such precision, and such strength? Today, the baoras stand quietly and majestically. Reflections of light on their steps create intriguing patterns, and the cool breeze rising from the depths reminds us that people once knew how to not only extract water, but do so beautifully and wisely. These wells are evidence that the ancients knew more about the land and climate than is sometimes thought. The Baori stepwells are not only engineering mysteries, but also symbols of humanity's connection to nature. They demonstrate how to work with the earth while respecting its cycles and forces. And as their steps continue downward into the cool twilight, they remind us that wisdom can be hidden in the simplest yet most thoughtful forms. Canals of the Kavri Valley. In a wide valley where the soil is fertile and soft and the Kavri River flows smoothly and leisurely, traces of ancient canals remain, crafted so meticulously that some of them still function today. These canals, extending deep into the earth, are striking in that they were constructed without any apparent technology, yet with astonishing precision. Their width, depth, and direction are calculated so that the water flows naturally, as if following the movement of the river itself. And this is one of India's most subtle mysteries. Walking along one of these canals, it seems as if it's always been there. Its edges are covered with grass, its walls are compacted by time, and the water flows through them calmly. But a closer look reveals that this is not a natural formation, but an artificial structure created by human hands. The canals are dug evenly and carefully, their turns precisely calibrated to prevent the flow from eroding the walls. The hidden harmony of canals is revealed in their perfect slope. For water to flow, the surface needs to have a slight slope. But if the slope is too steep, the water will erode the walls and carry away the soil. If it's too shallow, it will freeze and become a stagnant mass. In the Kavri Valley, this balance was achieved with remarkable precision. But how the craftsmen measured the slope without sophisticated instruments remains a mystery. In some places, the canals flow into small reservoirs. These served to store water when the river flooded. During droughts, these reservoirs released water back into the system, providing people with moisture. This approach speaks to a deep understanding of the water cycle and seasonal changes. But again, where did this knowledge come from? We have no written evidence to explain this. Interestingly, the canals are often located in such a way that they connect several villages. Some run parallel to the main riverbed, while others cross fields, directing water to where it's most needed. This demonstrates a high level of organization. Someone had to plan the system, coordinate the work, and ensure that the entire system functioned. The stone fortifications along some sections of the canals are also striking. The stones are laid to create a solid wall that holds back the flow. They are unadorned, only what's needed for stability. Their shape and size suggest that the craftsmen knew how to work with stone. However, these fortifications lack any traces of decorative elements, suggesting the utilitarian nature of the structures. There are areas where canals run under roads or next to rural homes. People living here often don't even consider the antiquity of these waterways. For them, they're part of the landscape. But when researchers begin to study their origins, they realize the system is too complex to be the result of random construction. Some canals have smooth embankments along their edges, stabilizing the soil. This resembles modern engineering methods, but is constructed with seemingly primitive means. However, these embankments have withstood the passage of time and are still in use. If you look closely, you can see that the soil is compacted in a special way. This method maintains its shape over centuries. Remarkably, the canals of the Cauvery Valley not only carried water, but also distributed it. At points where the flow needed to be diverted, special forks were created. They resemble miniature sluices, but without moving parts. The shape of the walls and the slope create a natural divide, diverting some of the water in a different direction. This suggests that people knew how to control the flow of water without the use of machinery. Some researchers suggest that the ancient inhabitants of the Cauvery Valley conducted years of observation. They studied how water behaved during the rainy season, how it flowed down the slopes, and where it accumulated. Based on this experience, they created canals, using knowledge passed down orally. But even so, it's difficult to understand how such knowledge could have been so precise. The canals look especially beautiful during the rainy season. Then the water rises above its normal level, and the entire space becomes alive. The flow moves smoothly, as if along a pre-calculated trajectory. And it seems as if it's not man who has integrated himself into nature, but rather nature who has integrated itself into the work of man. Today, this system of waterways remains a part of life. It reminds us that sometimes complex engineering problems can be solved with simple means, by listening to the earth and observing its behavior. The canals of the Cauvery Valley are not just a subtle calculation, but a manifestation of man's profound connection with nature. Standing on the banks of one of these canals, you hear the soft sound of the water and see it follow its path, unchanged for centuries. It's a reminder that ancient masters knew how not only to build, but also to sense the rhythm of the world. And this is precisely what makes the canals of the Cauvery Valley one of those mysteries that are closer to wisdom than to mysticism. Konark Solar Calendar. On the east coast, where the sun rises from the sea with particular brilliance, stands an ancient temple complex dedicated to the sun's path. Here, among stone chariots, carved columns, and solemn figures, lies one of the most astonishing engineering feats of antiquity, the solar calendar. Carved directly into stone, it tells the time with such precision that it's hard to believe it lacks sophisticated instruments. And it's precisely this precision that makes it one of India's best-kept secrets. The calendar is mounted on a huge stone wheel, part of a symbolic chariot of the sun. Each spoke is more than just a decorative element. It serves as a marker, indicating specific intervals of time. When viewed in the morning or evening, the shadow cast by the wheel reveals the hours with surprising precision. But the most astonishing aspect is that it is crafted without a single metal element. The wheel's shape is a perfect circle. The stone is precisely aligned so that even now, after centuries of erosion, its proportions remain precise. Every tooth, every notch, every line on the spokes is designed to catch the sun's light at a precise angle. It seems as if the craftsman knew in advance how the sun would move at different times of the year, and calculated every element with this in mind. If you stand nearby and observe the movement of the light, you can see the shadow move gently, as if along a predetermined trajectory. Every few minutes, the shape of the shadow changes, and if you know where to look, you can determine the time of day almost unmistakably. This astonishes even modern researchers. No metal instruments, no linear measurements, no clocks, only the sun, the stone, and a profound understanding of light. The images on the wheel convey mythological symbolism, scenes related to the journey of the divine chariot across the sky. But hidden within the symbols is geometry. Every figure, Every line is woven into the calendar's structure. Even the ornaments are arranged so as not to disrupt the overall pattern of the shadow. This suggests that the creators combined art and engineering. They thought not only in aesthetic, but also in mathematical categories. Some researchers believe the calendar was used for more than just telling time. It may have also served to identify seasonal cycles, solstices, equinoxes, and the onset of seasonal winds. When observing the calendar on certain days of the year, the shadows appeared differently, as if indicating turning points in natural rhythm. This makes the wheel part of a broader observational system. What's also interesting is that the Konark solar calendar doesn't stand alone. It's integrated into the architecture of the entire complex. The temple is a huge symbolic chariot of the sun god, and each wheel, including the one that serves as a calendar, is part of the overall design. But only one of them has precise geometry designed for measurement. This demonstrates that the craftsman distinguished between the artistic and the functional, although this distinction is not apparent on the surface. The mystery isn't just that the calendar works, it's how the craftsman achieved such precision. To create a working solar instrument, one must understand the sun's motion, its altitude, and seasonal changes. The terrain, wind direction, and air transparency must all be taken into account. But we don't know what methods the ancient builders used. Knowledge of light may have been passed down from generation to generation, but there are no written sources. Another mystery is the durability of the structure. The wheel has survived storms, floods, earthquakes, and hot seasons, yet continues to function. Its proportions are so well preserved that the shadows still fall almost perfectly. This speaks to a high level of understanding of materials. The stone chosen was resilient, capable of withstanding centuries of solar heat. At certain hours, a ray of sunlight passing through small indentations creates a thin line on the wheel's surface. This line moves smoothly, as if alive. Observers of the past could follow it and discern the passage of time based solely on the pattern of light. This turns the calendar into a kind of stone timekeeping that operates without any mechanism. Standing before the Konark solar calendar, you feel a strange calm. You see the shadow moving across the stone, as if reminding you that the passage of time is not controlled by man. But the very fact that man was able to capture this passage and capture it in stone evokes profound respect. This calendar is evidence that the ancient inhabitants of India knew how to listen to the world. They observed the sun, understood the rhythms of nature, and transformed this knowledge into forms that have endured through the ages. The Konark solar calendar remains one of those mysteries that conceals its depth beneath the stone's tranquil surface. It demonstrates that the wisdom of the past can be as accurate as modern technology if its roots lie in careful observation of the movement of light. India holds its secrets not in locked vaults, but right under the open sky, in stone, earth, water, ancient lines, and forgotten crafts. These 20 mysteries reveal how deeply people who lived long before us sensed the world. They created temples, canals, tools, and structures that continue to function, surprise, and inspire. And as we explore their legacy, it becomes clear the past is not gone. It quietly observes us, offering its questions to anyone willing to listen.